On today's episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, is the Odyssey the greatest movie made in the 21st century? I have seen it, and I have some thoughts. The Batman Part 2 is delayed yet again. Can't believe we're talking about this same topic. It's delayed to 2028. A Nova movie is in development. Why? I might be a little bit more concerned than most people about this movie, given the writer and potential director of the film. X-Men 97 Season 2 Episode 5 takes an interesting detour, in my opinion. And finally, Blue Beetle returns to the DCU in Man of Tomorrow. Is this a good idea? We discuss this and so much more on the episode starting right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 141. Wow. This is the Odyssey episode. It is so strange for me to believe that we finally made it. I remember watching that first teaser trailer a year ago in theaters, which is insanity to me. I think it was in front of Jurassic World Rebirth, I want to say. That's crazy to me. Anyways, we're finally here. I've seen the Odyssey. I can't believe what I just saw. And we're going to talk about it on this episode and so much more. So guys, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel or the Access Blockbusters Pod YouTube channel, the Access Blockbusters Pod YouTube channel, of course, being where the full episodes are hosted, then feel free to subscribe. Let me know in the comments what you think about any of these topics and give this video a like. And then if you're interested in the audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we are available there as well. Guys, this is an exciting episode. This is an exciting time. Let's get into today's
a familiar face returning to the DCU. This isn't the first time that this has happened, of course, with Peacemaker returning for Season 2, even though Season 1 was technically held in the DCEU, but Season 2 was in the new DCU. But now we have some confirmation from the reputable sources in the industry, in the Hollywood industry, that none other than Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, played by Joel Maraduena, is returning to the DCU in Man of Tomorrow. And I have some thoughts. About this. But before we get into any of that, let's just set the stage a little bit, because Blue Beetle was a character that had been actually confirmed to be part of the DCU. They were actually, I believe the last we heard, they were talking about working on an animated Blue Beetle show starring Jaime Reyes. And in terms of confusion about whether or not this was the same version as the one in the Blue Beetle movie, James Gunn said, and this is a quote that he made on, I think, a podcast with Michael Rosenbaum. He said that Jaime Reyes and Blue Beetle are the first DCU character, even though Superman is the first DCU movie. So a little confusing there, but I think essentially what he was trying to say was that because there were still some DCU projects that had yet to release at the time of James Gunn announcing his DCU slate, and Blue Beetle was one of them. Amongst other projects, of course, there was The Flash, there was Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and a whole host of other things that were going on at the time with the DCEU. But James Gunn was pretty adamant in saying that Joel Maraduena's Blue Beetle was going to be a part of whatever this new DCU was going to look like. And lo and behold, we now have confirmation that he's not only going to be appearing in his own television show, own animated television show, which we haven't really heard a lot from at this point, but I think is still going to happen as far as I know. But now he's going to appear in Man of Tomorrow. And first of all, let me get this out of the way. I understand that I am one of few people who don't love Blue Beetle. Because I know when Blue Beetle came out, it was pretty beloved. I think people generally really liked the movie, even though it didn't make a whole lot of money and not a lot of people saw it at the time. But I do think that the general sentiment around the movie was that people enjoyed it. And I, unfortunately, was not one of them. Again, doesn't give me any joy or happiness to say that. I wanted to like the movie. I watched it in theaters. I didn't like it then. I saw it recently for a rewatch that we will hopefully be continuing with our DCEU rewatch series on the podcast or main YouTube channel. And I still didn't really like it. Doesn't mean, though, that I didn't like Jolo's performance as Jaime. I think that the movie was very origin story-y, if that makes any sense. And I think that there were some things here and there that I didn't like. But overall, I like Jolo as Blue Beetle. He reminds me a little bit, honestly, of Shang-Chi in his own movie, which I really like Shang-Chi as a movie. But in terms of just having a charismatic actor portray a new character for the first time and come into his own, I thought that both, Simu Liu and Joel Maraduena were very charismatic, even though I think that maybe their acting ceiling wasn't as high, but still I really enjoyed both of them in their roles, and I was very excited to hear about Shang-Chi being in Doomsday. And I think for the most part, am generally excited to see Jolo in Man of Tomorrow. So that's not really what I'm quote unquote concerned about in terms of this news. It really all stems back from the idea, and we knew this was happening, so it's not a surprise that Jolo is going to be coming from the DCEU to the DCU. But after Supergirl and after everything that's happened there, it just has me a little bit worried because, and I believe I said this all the way back when James Gunn was talking about what the connections were with Peacemaker Season 1 and Peacemaker Season 2. And at the time, I said, I don't know if it was a good idea to carry over characters from the old DCEU. Now, granted, I don't think a lot of people are going to be super confused about this. I don't think that it's going to be like, what? Ben Affleck's Batman is here now? I don't think it's going to be like that. But I just think that it is still another step in muddying the waters. Again, not to say that I dislike Jolo in the role, not to say that I didn't like John Cena as Peacemaker, but it felt to me, at least for the Peacemaker example, that James was like, oh, well, it's Peacemaker, and I love Peacemaker, so we're just going to keep basically everything from the DCEU. Peacemaker, all the cast and crew and the story carried over, and so did Jolo. And I'm sure that there are going to be other little things that carry over here and there based on maybe, who knows, maybe Margot Robbie is still playing Harley Quinn. We don't know, right? But I think that if you're going to do a full reboot, new Superman, great, having a new continuity. And when a new Batman comes out, great. People are going to hopefully understand that. But I think that insofar as you can make this as clearly and as coherently a new reality for DC, I think would have been a good idea. And I don't know, honestly, what the ramifications are, or what the ramifications are going to be of just carrying over certain elements and not others. Because, and I'm not saying that this is right or wrong or whatever, but there are going to be people who are like, well, wait a second, then why aren't you carrying over this thing? Like, why aren't you carrying over, let's just talk about the example I gave, Ben Affleck's Batman, or Henry Cavill's Superman, or Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman. I think that when you pick and choose in this way, I think that it's fine. And I think in the grand scheme of things, it'll be fine. But I also think it does not help because it muddies the waters a little bit in terms of separating out whatever the DCU is going to be, which is, again, and I don't say this with joy, but it's on shaky footing right now. And it's not over, right? The DCU is not over just because of Supergirl or anything like that. But I do think that it's on a little bit of a shaky footing, and I don't know. We'll have to see about this. Again, it's not going to ruin Man of Tomorrow or anything like that because, people are not going to sit in the theater and go, wait, that's the Blue Beetle from the DCEU. I'm confused. No one's going to do that. It's going to be fine. But I just think overall, it's starting to, again, build a picture of some uncertainty and some, maybe confusion is too strong of a word, but you know what I mean. I think that this is an interesting move, and we'll see where it goes from here. Guys, what do you make of Jolo Maradueña's Blue Beetle Jaime Reyes coming into Man of Tomorrow? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty, we're back with another episode of X-Men 97 Season 2, Episode 5. An interesting episode, if I do say so myself. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for X-Men 97 Season 2, Episode number 5, an episode focused a lot, hopefully not a spoiler, on Wolverine and Morph. So if you haven't seen the episode, no worries, just make sure to save the segment, save the podcast, save the video, or whatever format you're listening to, and save it for later, and then come back once you've seen it, and then we will dive into spoilers. But for the rest of you, welcome. Let's dive right in. So, like I said, and we knew this was coming. I knew this was coming because we had gotten a glimpse, a sneak peek into the episode titles for X-Men 97 Season 2. And I don't watch every single breakdown video or analysis video, but I'd seen a couple with X-Men 97. And people were talking about the fact that, Episode 5 is a reference to a Weapon X episode in the original X-Men animated series. So it seemed like they were going to be focusing in on Wolverine and not necessarily picking up right with the main storyline of all the X-Men back from their present and past and future timelines into the main one with Apocalypse. So I was prepared for that, and I'd be curious if you guys, those of you who didn't know that going into the episode, if you had a different experience from me, but I knew that going in. I knew this was going to be a more Wolverine standalone kind of episode. So just judging it based on that, I was still a little bit let down by this episode because I feel like it was very, very different tonally from the rest of the season, which is okay. You can have different episodes, especially this is 10 episodes, so it's not like a 22 episode sitcom length season of television, but still 10 episodes, you can have an episode here or there where different things are happening. Again, as long as they are servicing the story, right? Because you know me, if you know me at all, if you've been watching my content for a long time, you know I hate filler episodes. in television shows, especially short television episodes, or short television seasons, rather. If you have 22 episodes of Friends, have a bottleneck episode, have a random episode in there, it's fine. Because it's a sitcom. It is what it is. Have 10 episodes, have 8 episodes, gotta tighten it up. Having an episode where characters just go off and do random things, it really does irk me. So I'm not opposed to different episodes tonally or different episodes plot-wise, as long as it's all tying back to the greater plot. And in an interesting way, I actually do think this episode does tie back into some of the things that are going on in the overarching plot of X-Men 97. I just don't think that the reasons that they were doing this episode justified the ends. The means did not justify the ends, in my opinion, because the means really was having this whole side adventure onto this Weapon X facility, and the ends, to me very clearly, was just to give Wolverine his adamantium back. And yes, there was some character development between Wolverine and Morph, of course, so that was good, but I think in general, if I had to just distill this entire episode into one sentence, I would say Episode 5, X-Men 97 Season 2, Episode 5, was there to give Wolverine his adamantium claws back, which it's been a while since I've seen X-Men 97 Season 1, but watching some recaps and things like that, people had pointed out, I had totally forgotten about this, that Wolverine had lost his adamantium claws and his adamantium on his skeleton, the metal that makes him basically indestructible. I mean, he's indestructible as it is, but even more indestructible, and gives him the metal on his claws. He had lost all of that stuff in Season 1, and this episode just felt like, oh, well, but he has bone claws now, and that's not as interesting, so we're going to give it back to him. Again, maybe later on in this season, we're going to get a very good explanation as to why that's super important. But in terms of the grand scheme of this season, it felt kind of strange. It felt just like, oh, we're having this episode for this one purpose, and so we're just going to give you some things to look at here and there, some action, some fun stuff, a Spider-Man cameo, a Deadpool cameo when Morph turns into those characters, and then we'll get on out of here. I don't know. I don't love that kind of stuff. I'm not going to say that this episode wasn't entertaining. It's always fun to see random mutant powers, like with X-Men, like Wolverine and Sabretooth and Morph and whatnot. It is always fun, admittedly, to see X-Men just use their powers in fun and interesting ways. But I don't know. This spoiler discussion may not be that long because I just thought, oh, well, this is very clearly what this episode is and what it's going for, and it's entertaining and it's fine, but it doesn't necessarily feel like it's that consequential other than just to give Wolverine his adamantium claws back, which I don't know how that's going to factor into the rest of the season. Also, we're at the halfway point now, so, I mean, it felt like the halfway point was really all the X-Men coming back to the present, but we'll see where it goes from there. The other thing I will say about this episode, again, not a whole lot for me to talk about. I thought it was fine. I thought it was entertaining enough, but with those other bigger, not concerns, but bigger observations about the season baked in that we just talked about. The other thing I will say is that it felt tonally dissonant from the rest of the X-Men 97 series that I'd seen. And again, as somebody who hasn't seen the original animated series, there might be a lot more in here that if you had watched the original series, you might be more like, oh yeah, that's that, and that's this, and that's that. And so, totally understand that perspective. But for me, I'm watching this episode, it feels so different. It almost feels like, and I know this is a very recent comparison, so I know that this may not be the most resonant for everyone. It almost felt like this was an episode of Stranger Things Tales from 85, right? Where you have these creatures, the Brood, almost like little symbiotes, things that are attaching to mutants and then turning them into zombie kind of symbiote-like characters. I don't know if they're related to the Venom symbiotes. I don't think so, but you guys can let me know in the comments if you are more versed in that comic knowledge. But this really almost felt like a Stranger Things episode more than anything else, right? You have these goo monsters chasing people around and infecting people, and you got to fight the monsters and the hive mind, and also got some random superpowered people just hanging around here. It really did oddly feel like an episode of Stranger Things more than an episode of X-Men, which again, I understand it's a very weird anachronistic analogy because of course X-Men was before Stranger Things, but still, hopefully you guys get the idea. So again, I didn't hate this episode. Very much shorter spoiler discussion here because I think for me, from my outsider perspective, I understand why they made this episode. I understand what they were trying to do in this episode. And within the confines of this episode, it was entertaining. But the reason they made this episode wasn't super compelling to me. Give Wolverine his adamantium back. And B, the entertainment part, for sure. The episode was fun to watch, but it felt just so different from a lot of the other stuff that we're seeing in the X-Men
97 series, which again is not a bad thing inherently, but it almost felt like it was coming from a completely different show. So those are my thoughts on X-Men 97 Season 2, Episode 5. A fine, enjoyable, interesting episode, but probably not going to rank this one on the top of my Marvel Cinematic Universe / Marvel Animation episodes of all favorite episodes of all time ranking, if I ever do one of those. So what did you guys think of this episode? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty, it's been a little while since we've talked about a new upcoming or potentially in development Marvel project. I feel like in the coming days we're going to be getting a lot more of that because San Diego Comic-Con is in just a couple weeks, and I don't know, maybe this is not the right time for Marvel to be dropping a whole ton of new projects. We remember that a couple times they've done this over the last 5 or 6 years. It hasn't really panned out super well for them because of all the cancellations and shufflings and things like that. Maybe this is the time for them just to focus on Doomsday. Who knows? But I have a feeling they're still going to announce some new things at Comic-Con this year. But it looks like Christmas came a little bit early because we have confirmation from Deadline, one of the more reputable sources in the movie industry, that a movie is in development, a movie that we haven't really talked about in terms of talking about your Shang-Chi 2s and your Avengers 7s. Is that what it's going to be? At the post-Secret Wars Avengers film, your X-Men movies. Those are all things that we know are in development, at least Black Panther 3, maybe Doctor Strange 3. This one has been rumored. Actually, it was rumored as a TV show. We did a segment on that a while ago. But apparently, according to Deadline, again, a very reputable source, Marvel is developing a movie around the character Nova. And my first reaction is I am concerned. Now, I didn't give the full context as to why I was concerned because on the surface, at face value, great, this is fine. We've heard lots and lots of rumors that Marvel is going to be delving more into the cosmic side of their universe going forward. Maybe that makes sense in terms of, I don't know, do you want to try Phoenix again? Maybe with a new X-Men, but also characters like Nova, for example. Maybe Midnight Suns deals with that. Maybe the Guardians of the Galaxy come back in some form or fashion. The Eternals, Celestials, things of that nature. If they want to do the Avengers versus X-Men kind of thing, there was a recent comic book run where there were Avengers, X-Men, and Eternals. So sure, all of that makes sense. And Nova is a character that I know relatively little about from the comic books. We talked, again, a decent while ago about the rumored Nova TV show that was being developed, and actually has been confirmed here by this Deadline article that there was a TV show being developed and being written by a showrunner or TV show executive named Sabir Pirzada, I believe, according to this article, and that was shelved in 2025 as Marvel was doing some reevaluations of their projects and whatnot. So this is going to be something completely different. But I still haven't gotten to the reason why I'm concerned about this project. And it is in this article right here. I'm going to read from the very beginning, and hopefully you will see what I'm talking about after I do so. So this article starts out here and says, quote, after rumors started to spread of a potential Nova project from filmmaker Michael Waldron last week. Actually, this was something that I personally had not seen last week, so this is the first time I'm hearing of it. Continuing on with the article, sources now tell Deadline that the Chad Powers creator, I'd not heard of that either, is developing a feature film around the comic at Marvel Studios. Insiders stress the project is still in early development, but that Waldron is on board to pen the script with eye to directing the project if it moves forward. Okay, so just based on that one paragraph alone, there are three things here that I want to talk about. One is just where the project is, and then two reasons why I am a little concerned about this just from the jump. Number one, it's important to remember that this project is in early development. They've talked about the Nova TV show, that got shelved. It's possible this ends up like Blade. This is not an official Marvel confirmation, by the way. So just for the record, if Marvel never talks about this again, doesn't mean that they never had faith in Nova or anything like that. They probably tried and whatnot, but it just didn't come to fruition. This is still an early development. If it's an early development, if there's not even a script and Michael Waldron is just on board to write the script, this movie is probably not coming out until 2030, I want to say. 2029 at the earliest. So this is a long, long, long ways away from happening. So that's the first thing I want to talk about here. But the other two things that concern me. Number one, the headliner of this article, Michael Waldron is on board to direct. Now, I think your mileage might vary with how you take this piece of information. And for me personally, my mileage is a little bit on the not so sure about that. Michael Waldron is the showrunner, and I believe he wrote a good chunk. I could be wrong. I think he wrote a good chunk of Loki. And Loki is a show that I maintain season 1 is wildly inconsistent. Season 2 is pretty good, I think. And put together as one big season, if you took all of season 1 and stuck it with all of season 2, I think it's pretty good, actually. It's one really interesting, cohesive narrative. I just think season 1, to me, on its own, doesn't really stand alone. And if it does, then it's just not very good, in my opinion, even though it has glimpses of brilliance. We've talked about this many times on the channel. So, at face value, Loki, to me, is pretty good overall, if that's what we're looking at Michael Waldron's filmography, but inconsistent. And then Michael Waldron was tapped to pen Secret Wars, I think, at one point, but no longer is doing that. And instead but in conjunction with that, he was brought on board to pen Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, even for me, as somebody who I generally enjoy Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, and I say enjoy, I don't love the movie. It's not my favorite MCU movie at all or anything like that, but I enjoy it. I think it's okay. The writing, though, certainly is not the strong suit of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And to me, I don't think, if we're looking at just purely writing for Doctor Strange, and I understand that there were things that went on and they had to redo the script at a certain point. So I get that maybe that Doctor Strange is not Michael Waldron's best foot forward in terms of writing. That being said, all we have to judge is the finished product, and the finished product is not my favorite. So on this second point here, a little concerned about the fact that Michael Waldron is on board to write the script. For example, if these were, and I forget their names off the top of my head, but if this was the duo that had been penning the Spider-Man scripts, all 4 of them, I'd be like, okay, great, on board. If this was Marcus and McFeely, I'd be like, okay, great, on board. For this, I'm a little hesitant about the fact that he's writing it. But the third thing is what really has me concerned. And this really doesn't have anything to do with Michael Waldron at all, and more just what it says about people stepping into this role. The third thing, if you caught that last line, I'm going to read this again. Quote, Waldron is on board to pen the script with eye to directing the project if it moves forward. I looked, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody can correct me if I've totally had an oversight and I missed a huge project that he's directed. As far as my research was able to show, Michael Waldron has not directed anything. Or at least any big TV show or movie, or even any small TV show or movie, as far as I was able to find out. And again, maybe Michael Waldron could develop into one of the best directors working today. I don't know that. I'm sure that he's very gifted, and I'm sure he could. But putting a first-time director on a project, on a Marvel Studios project, screams disaster to me. Not that the film is going to be a disaster. Make no mistake, that's not what I'm saying, but rather, you're not setting up the film to reach its fullest potential. So that if a script, let's just say, for example, the script for Nova that Michael Waldron is potentially going to write is amazing. That's great. Would love that. But then let's just say that Michael Waldron then steps in to direct the project. It's a first feature film. I don't know if anybody, personally, even some of the greatest filmmakers of all time, their first films are not their greatest films. And I just think it's setting up the project to not be as successful as it could be. That's what I mean by a disaster. Not that it's going to actually be a disaster. I'm sure it could be okay. But it's like, what if you took this project that Dave Filoni wrote, and then you were like, okay, Dave Filoni, direct this movie. Which he didn't do for Mandalorian and Grogu, by the way. But I think it's similar to that in a certain sense. So I actually, the thing I'm most nervous about in this article, and again, it's early development. This movie might not come out for 4 or 5 years. But I would be super hesitant to give the reins over to any first-time director for a Marvel project. We'll have to see. This may not resurface for a while. They may not even talk about it at all at this Comic-Con, next Comic-Con. It might not be until 2028's Comic-Con that they talk about this again, so we'll have to see how that all pans out. Guys, what do you think about A, Nova movie being in development, B, Michael Waldron potentially being in talks to write it, and then C, Michael Waldron potentially being in talks to direct the movie? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty, the film that will never come out, seemingly, although cameras are now rolling, so there is hope on the horizon, which is ironic because that was the message at the end of the first film. And I, of course, am talking about the Batman and now the new film, The Batman Part 2. Now, The Batman Part 2. The first Batman film came out in 2022. It came out right at the tail end of the big brunt of the pandemic, right when theaters were starting to get their footing again. Spider-Man No Way Home had come out just a few months before. It made almost $2 billion. People were starting to go back to theaters. It was a much better time for the theaters, and it made a lot of money. I think it made something like $700 million. People generally really liked it. Me personally, I
loved it. And of course, it makes sense at that point. You have a very successful new version of Batman, post Ben Affleck, post Christian Bale, and really the Ben Affleck version never got off the ground. Sadly, I liked the Ben Affleck version, although I thought his portrayal in different projects was a little bit inconsistent, but I liked him in general. But to me, as I saw Robert Pattinson's Batman on the big screen in 2022, I thought this is the next Christopher Nolan, Christian Bale version of Batman. This is the next definitive Batman for this era, for this decade, for this generation, dare I say. So of course it felt obvious you're going to make a Batman 2, except that movie just wouldn't come. Year after year passed by, there wasn't even a hint of production. Matt Reeves would give little clips, snippets here and there about, oh, we're working on it, we're going to make it happen, the script, and James Gunn would kind of pop in here and there and talk about the script, but it just seemed like nothing would ever come. The timeline of this is so interesting to me because the Batman Part 2 was originally supposed to come out on October 2nd, 2026, which in itself would make a 4.5-year gap between the first and second films. Not obscenely long, but still longer than most superhero films in this day and age. But again, if Matt Reeves wanted to do another film in between, that's well and good. I actually don't know if he directed another film in between, though. Batman Part 1 and Batman Part 2, I digress. But again, 4.5 years, it is what it is. But then Warner Brothers delayed it to October 1st, 2027. And honestly, I feel like I remember release dates being even earlier than 2026. Like, I thought I remembered there being a 2025 release date in there as well. So this film has been pushed and pushed and pushed. And now it's being pushed again. Hopefully, one last time. We said this about the previous release date of October 1st, 2027. I really hope this is the last time. The Batman Part 2 has officially been pushed to 2028, February 18th, 2028, as Matt Reeves releases the first test footage of Robert Pattinson as Batman in the Batman Part 2 and officially announces the release date February 18th, 2028. Now, talking about the test footage for just a quick second there, I mean, it looks great. And for those of you who are saying, well, I feel like Access Blockbusters coverage of DC has been not as positive as of late with the DCU, that might be true. Again, like I've been saying, it has nothing to do with DC and an inherent bias against DC or anything like that. Not at all. I've been a little James Gunned out, a little James Gunn fatigue, and the DCU has started out with basically just James Gunn, and then I just didn't really like Supergirl, so that is what it is. But guys, I love the Batman. It is, I may be one of the fools out there who is willing to say, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, it's just my opinion, that it might rival some of the Dark Knight films. Certainly The Dark Knight Rises, but even Batman Begins, dare I say The Dark Knight? I don't know. I'm not willing to say that yet, but I love the Batman. And the Batman Part 2, whenever it would come out, was always going to be one of my absolute most anticipated movies of that year. That being said, this is getting ridiculous. Because I'm not saying that I don't want Matt Reeves to take his time and make the best film possible. I think that's great. I am saying, though, that cameras are rolling right now. It is July 2026. The original release date was October 1st, 2027. In my mind, if the shoot is something ridiculously long for a movie, a standard movie, let's say 6 months, because that is an incredibly long shoot for a movie. But fine, let's just say the shoot for the Batman Part 2 is 6 months long, and it ends around December or January. They still have 10 months to edit and make post-production for this film. And that includes all the time that they're going to be doing visuals and stuff like that during the filming of this movie. I don't quite get it. And I understand that we don't have insight into what specifically is going on with the Batman Part 2. But why does Matt Reeves need so much time to make this movie? It is a little confusing to me, honestly. Maybe the movie will come out and it all makes sense. We'll be like, oh, I get it. But for right now, I'm so baffled by these constant release delays because as cameras are rolling, as filming has begun for the Batman Part 2, it had, I think, more than enough time to make that October 2027 release date, and now it's going to be delayed by 4 more months into 2028. And look, again, I want this to be the best film that it can be, but you have to remember, and this is with a pandemic, there were 3 Spider-Man films released in the span of 5 years. Spider-Man Homecoming in 2017, Spider-Man Far From Home in 2019, and Spider-Man No Way Home in 2021, all with a pandemic in the middle of it. And I love all 3 of those movies. Again, they're different people working on these movies. I understand that. Matt Reeves likes to take his time and go slower. But this is getting ridiculous, I think. And I say this as somebody, it sounds like I'm upset. I'm upset because I want to see this movie so badly.
I really do. I love the Penguin. I love the Batman. And I want to see this movie incredibly badly. So we'll have to wait until February 2028. My goodness, that is a long ways away. But hopefully, by the time we get there, it'll be an amazing movie. Guys, what do you think of this delay for the Batman Part 2? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty, this is the year of Avengers Doomsday. This is the year of Spider-Man Brand New Day. This is the year of Dune Part 3. And yet, I think for a lot of people, the most anticipated movie of 2026 was going to be Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. It was not my number one most anticipated movie of the year, but I was certainly looking forward to it as the year got kicking off in early 2026. And it's crazy how fast the year has gone. We are here now. I have seen The Odyssey. Let's talk about it. This is going to be a non-spoiler review. This is, of course, based on Homer's The Odyssey, which is one of the oldest stories of fiction, mythology, that has ever been written. So I will call this a non-spoiler review. I will obviously not give away anything that Christopher Nolan has done uniquely in terms of specifics for The Odyssey, but I may talk about some things that go on in the story that are just well known in the mythology. So again, if you don't know those things, I apologize. But again, we're not going to dive into super specifics about The Odyssey. Now, Christopher Nolan has been hailed as the greatest filmmaker of our generation by many people. There might be arguments around Quentin Tarantino or Martin Scorsese, or although I feel like Christopher Nolan is maybe a little bit in the newer camp, quote unquote newer camp, but people like Denis Villeneuve and Guillermo del Toro. So there are a lot of filmmakers out there that are jockeying for that title. But Christopher Nolan, whenever he makes a movie, it has in recent days become an event. Oppenheimer, even without Barbie, was an event. And I thought Oppenheimer was great. And I was really surprised by Oppenheimer, which is interesting because I thought that on the surface, this was going to be a movie about the bomb. This was going to be a movie about constructing the bomb in Oppenheimer. Instead, I found the most compelling parts of Oppenheimer and the places where Christopher Nolan made his mark, for me personally, is in the second half with the political intrigue with Robert Downey Jr.'s character. I thought, honestly, that second half was far more compelling than the first half. Not to say that the first half wasn't interesting and exciting and well made. Of course it was. But I thought the second half was far more interesting. And it showed me that Christopher Nolan is still at the top of his game in terms of surprising audiences, being versatile, being able to do almost anything within the movie genre. And then it's announced that his next movie is The Odyssey, an adaptation of, again, one of the oldest pieces of literature, writing, fiction, mythology ever written. And the cast is jaw-dropping. Just looking at the Wikipedia page, it is an insane list, and we'll talk about a lot of these performances and some of the ones that stood out to me, but it is an insane cast that was announced, and the trailers looked like, again, yet another event film. But like I've been talking about on the channel, just to give one more piece of context here, I had not been incredibly over the moon excited until a second trailer came out. The first teaser trailer and then the subsequent first full trailer, I was like, this looks like a great Christopher Nolan movie. But the second trailer got into the plot a little bit more, got into the machinations of Robert Pattinson's character being at the palace while Odysseus is trying to return home, and all of that started to click into my head, and I got very, very excited for the movie. And so I sat in the theater, I watched The Odyssey. I was not able to see it in IMAX, unfortunately, but I saw it in 70 millimeters, so I think I got to see every frame, at least in the aspect ratio that Christopher Nolan shot the movie in, which is exciting. I am really glad I got to see it in that format. And I try my hardest on this YouTube channel not to be hyperbolic when it's not warranted. So hear me when I say, I think The Odyssey might be the greatest film made in the 21st century. I'll repeat that. I think The Odyssey might be the greatest movie, greatest film made in the 21st century. Now for me, if you know me on the channel, one of the first videos you'll see on my homepage is why La La Land, the Damien Chazelle movie, is my perfect movie. And I go into great detail explaining what that means in that video. And long story short, that movie is resonant for me as an individual in ways that I just haven't seen in any other movie before. Emotionally and mentally and musically and in so many different ways. And so, people ask me, right after I saw The Odyssey, is it better than La La Land? I don't even know how to compare those two things because, again, La La Land resonates with me on almost a spiritual different level than The Odyssey does. But The Odyssey, as an experience, as a film, in almost every single aspect of filmmaking. It's like this is the peak of what we can accomplish today in filmmaking in almost every single way. The cinematography is gorgeous. The acting is impeccable. I mean, it's one thing to have an A-list cast like this and have all of these movie stars. It's another to fully utilize their talents, to have a purpose behind almost every single character that they're playing, and make sure to grab the greatest actors, not for the sake of doing stunt videos and promos and things like that, just for that, but to have performers at the top of their game, some of the best actors working today, and put them into this movie. The acting is incredible. The music is great. The music is great. It is tense. It builds in moments where you are feeling the tension. The action is incredible as well. Am I going to say this is the greatest action movie ever made? No, but when the movie needs to have action and stakes, the music swells and the camera starts moving and all these things start to work in harmony together as there are different monsters and creatures like Cyclops and giants and other creatures that are in the Odyssey as well. But even just hand-to-hand combat, all of that worked incredibly, incredibly well. The story was shaped in such a way because, let's be honest, and this was one of my fears. This was one of my fears, honestly, before seeing that second trailer, was, well, how are you going to make a film out of this story? Which, again, feels naive now looking back at this movie that I just watched. But, you know, the original story being basically, and it's been a while, admittedly, I read the Odyssey in high school, I think, so it's been a while since I've read the Odyssey. But the Odyssey as a tale it's one of the classic tales of guy goes from point A to point B to point C to point D and he goes home. Again, an incredible, massive oversimplification of the book. But just to say, I was wondering, how are you going to make a film with a B structure and subplots and other side characters and things like that? Or is the movie just going to be Odysseus going home? The way that Christopher Nolan frames the story in different ways, there are mechanisms that he uses in narrative storytelling to make sure you understand that there are still time elements, so that there are ticking clocks, there are stakes, there are reasons that characters need to be in certain places by certain times. There are politics going on here in terms of the kingdoms and the thrones. I mean, you see in the trailers, right? But the vacancy of Odysseus is obviously an incredibly important thing with Robert Pattinson's character, who is trying to usurp the throne, right? Again, all in the trailers. But all of those things start to weave together, and then there is a really, I think, delicate but also robust way in which the story of Odysseus going home, those different steps in the journey that could have just been very easily laid out as point A to point B to point C. It's very complex and yet simple in a really interesting way. It's framed so that everything is in context, everything makes sense. And then there are little flashes here and there as well that are never confusing but start to build towards a bigger picture. And this is the ultimate cherry on top because, again, this could have just been an epic action adventure movie. But the cherry on top of all of this comes in a later scene, no spoilers again, but comes in a later scene where the pieces start to click together. And the point of the movie, almost like how in Oppenheimer at the very end of that movie, you see the ramifications start to dawn on Cillian Murphy's Robert J. Oppenheimer, and you start to understand what this means for the character, and you start to understand why this is significant. Not just, oh, this was a movie, but rather, how does this affect the characters, and what does this do for them, and why is this important? And there are moments, but there is a moment towards the end of this movie where it all starts to click together of what Nolan is trying to say. This is a movie that has something to say about history, about war, about brutality, about learning from the past, and trying to right the wrongs of the past, but also, again, the penchant for humanity to make the same mistakes as we've done before. There are a lot of really interesting themes that are explored at the end of this movie. Although, speaking of the end of this movie, there is, if I had one little nitpick, I think the last 2 or 3 minutes were a little bit rushed. I might have liked the emotional and conclusive resolution to this movie to be, I would have liked Nolan maybe to have sat in it a little bit longer. That's really my only nitpick for this movie. I honestly can't really think of much else. The last thing I'll touch on here in this review is, of course, the cast. There are so many incredible actors. I'm just looking at the Wikipedia page, like I said. Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Robert Pattinson, Lupita Nyong'o, Samantha Morton, John Leguizamo, Zendaya, Charlize Theron, John Bernthal, Himesh Patel, Elliot Page, Benny Safdie, Who else? Mia Goth. There are so many incredible actors in this movie. I want to highlight a few of them. We'll get to Matt Damon, of course, at the end. I thought Anne Hathaway was great. Tom Holland was pretty good as Telemachus, but I think he was good. He was pretty good. But Anne Hathaway, in particular, was quite good. I think John Bernthal, in his short scenes as well, was able to be quite captivating. Everyone was talking about Samantha Morton as Cersei coming out of the movies or in the reviews, and I can see why. She has some really riveting scenes in this movie that are, well, unforgettable, shall we say. Zendaya was great in the short amount of time that she was in, but honestly, guys, there's a reason that he is the lead character. Matt Damon as Odysseus is, I think, physically, of course, because we know Christopher Nolan, he's not filming these on sound stages. He is actually going out there. I am not surprised. I would not be surprised to learn that he actually had Matt Damon out on boats and in rafts and in thunderstorms and things like that. I don't know how much of it is visual effects and whatnot, which again is a testament to the movie, but Matt Damon physically had to shoulder what I can only imagine is an incredible amount to make this movie. He got into incredible shape, of course. Emotionally, he had to wear it. Odysseus is not a one-dimensional character, by the way. It might surprise you. He is not a one-dimensional character. I think there are things about the character that as you see his story unfold, you realize the character who started out in the Trojan War is not the same character who returns home. And that is a testament to Matt Damon as an actor. He is the lead of this movie. It's interesting because towards the beginning, I was thinking, oh, are we going to see as much Matt Damon as I thought we would? Are we going to kind of bounce back between all these different things? But as the movie goes on, it becomes clear this is Matt Damon's movie. And he is, I would be, again, not knowing what the other Oscar movies are going to be, I just would be stunned if Matt Damon wasn't nominated for an Oscar for this movie. I would be stunned if this movie itself wasn't nominated for Best Picture. I honestly might be stunned if this movie didn't win Best Picture, because I don't know. I really liked Oppenheimer, and it, of course, won Best Picture. This to me is better in almost every facet. And I say that as someone who really did like Oppenheimer. If we are living in a world where this is not my favorite movie at the end of the year, I think this is one of the greatest years for me personally as a film and movie fan. If Avengers Doomsday or Dune Part 3 are better than this movie, I can't even begin to express how amazing those two movies are going to be, just as an example. This is, again, I try not to be hyperbolic for the sake of being hyperbolic. I think The Odyssey might be the greatest film I've seen in the 21st century. Guys, have you seen The Odyssey? What did you think about it? Plain and simple, let me know in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 141. I can't even believe what I saw with The Odyssey. I have no words. I mean, I do, clearly. I said about 10 to 13 minutes worth of words. But in all seriousness, this is why I love movies. This is why we do this. This is amazing. And to think that we are still looking forward to Spider-Man and Clayface and Doomsday and Dune Part 3. It is, wow, what a year. What a year. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us yet again. Make sure to subscribe on your way out, either on the Access Block, well, I guess if you're listening to this outro, on the Access Blockbusters Pod YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments what you think about any of these topics. And if you're interested in the audio-only platforms as well, leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Overcast as well. That will do it, guys, for episode number 141, and I will see you guys in the next one.